Picture yourself standing on a bridge. It's quiet, not the uneasy kind of quiet, the peaceful kind. Below you, the river slides past like glass. Cars drift by an easy pace. A few people lean on the railing, taking photos. On one side of the span, an American flag flutters in the breeze. On the other side, a Canadian flag answers it. No soldiers, no checkpoints, no fences, just an invisible line across the water. You've probably heard this place described as the longest peaceful border on Earth. Two neighbors, two allies, two countries that trust each other completely. It feels like the safest place you could possibly stand. But here's the strange part. Almost a century ago, this exact border was studied, measured, and mapped, not for trade or travel, but for invasion. Because hidden deep inside U.S. military archives, there was once a plan, stamped confidential, locked away, a plan that didn't talk about friendship. It talked about conquest. It was a full blueprint for a surprise attack on Canada. Not a theory, not a classroom exercise, a real, approved military strategy. Ships, troops, bombes, timetables, all designed to take the country by force. This is the story of the plan they called War Plan Red, and the time America quietly prepared to fight the nation that would later become its closest ally. To understand why, you have to rewind to the 1920s and 30s. The world back then didn't look like it does today. The United States and Britain weren't inseparable partners yet. They were competitors, two rising powers staring each other down across the Atlantic. Britain still ruled a global empire. Its navy controlled trade routes. Its flag flew over half the planet. America was younger, richer, and growing fast. And both sides knew it. There were arguments over shipping lanes, over oil, over influence, over who would dominate the century. If another global war broke out, planners in Washington feared something uncomfortable. What if the British Empire wasn't a friend next time? What if it was the enemy? That question changed everything. Because if war ever came with Britain, the United States couldn't just sail across the ocean and attack London. The Royal Navy was too powerful. So American strategists searched for a weak point. They looked at a map, and their eyes drifted north. Canada. At the time, Canada wasn't fully independent in foreign policy. It was still closely tied to Britain, loyal to the crown, to American generals that made Canada dangerous. If Britain went to war, Canada could become a giant staging ground. British troops landing in Halifax, planes launching from Ontario, ships supplying attacks on American cities. From a military perspective, it was like having your rival's front porch connected to your backyard. So planners came to a ruthless conclusion. If a war with Britain ever started, Canada would have to be taken first, before the British could even react. And that's how War Plan Red was born. Every potential enemy nation was assigned a color. Britain was red. The United States was blue. Canada, as part of the empire, became crimson. The plan wasn't vague. It was detailed down to the mile. Routes were drawn, rail lines marked, ports circled in pencil. Officers calculated how long it would take to capture major cities, how many troops were needed, how quickly resistance could be crushed. The goal wasn't a slow campaign. It was shock and speed. Hit hard, hit everywhere, ended in weeks. One thrust aimed at Halifax to block the Atlantic and prevent British ships from landing. Another tore Montreal to sever rail and supply lines. Forces pushing through the Great Lakes region to seize factories and power plants. Columns racing across the prairies to cut the country in half. Naval blockades on the west coast to isolate Vancouver. The idea was simple and brutal. Slice Canada into pieces so it couldn't function as a nation. And some proposals went even further. Documents discussed bombing infrastructure, destroying transport hubs, using whatever weapons were necessary to win quickly. Nothing about it sounded like two friendly neighbors. It sounded like total war. But capturing territory wasn't the only objective. Resources mattered just as much. Canada had things the United States desperately needed in a global conflict. Minerals, timber, wheat, nickel for steel production. Control those, and you controlled the machinery of war itself. To the planners, it wasn't personal. It was math, maps, numbers, logistics, cold calculations made in quiet rooms, while regular people on both sides of the border went about their lives completely unaware. And here's the twist most people never hear about. Canada wasn't naive. They suspected all of this. Canadian officers studied the same maps and came to the same chilling conclusion. If war ever broke out, they would be outmatched. So they drafted their own desperate strategy. Instead of waiting to be invaded, they considered striking first. Small, fast units crossing south to disrupt roads, bridges, and rail lines, causing chaos, buying time, not to conquer America, just to slow it down long enough for help to arrive. It was a plan built on delay and survival. Two neighbors, both quietly preparing for the possibility of fighting each other, and neither public knowing a thing. For years, the plan sat ready, updated, revised, filed away. All it would have taken was one political crisis, one spark, and the longest peaceful border on Earth might have turned into a battlefield. But history swerved. A new threat rose in Europe, then another in Asia. Suddenly, the rivalry between Britain and America didn't matter anymore. There were bigger dangers. Instead of pointing guns at each other, the two countries found themselves on the same side. Allies, partners, fighting shoulder to shoulder in World War II. The invasion maps were shelved, the arrows erased, the files boxed up and forgotten. Decades later, researchers digging through declassified archives stumbled onto them. Old documents, faded ink, plans for a war that never happened. People were stunned, because the friendly border everyone took for granted had once been measured like a target. Today, you can still stand on that same bridge. Watch the water, feel the breeze, see the flags waving at each other like old friends. And it all feels permanent, safe, untouchable. But history has a funny way of reminding us something uncomfortable. Countries don't run on emotions. They run on interests. Alliances change. Threats change. Plans get written just in case. So that peaceful line between the two flags, it isn't protected by luck. It's protected by choice. Every single day, and somewhere deep in some archive, there are always new plans being drafted that we'll probably never see. Because the calmest borders often hide the darkest what-ifs.